It was a grey, drizzly morning in Segovia, a small Colombian mining town balanced precariously on the northwestern tip of the Andes. And Colombia's notorious riot police, in black RoboCop riot gear and black ponchos, were lined up on top of a hill. Below them was the main picket line, set up by the informal gold miners who called a general strike. It was lightly manned by a handful of people, sheltering under eaves from the rain. But word was getting out, and more began to filter down. Some of them were carrying poles and bats. The local police commander approached, walking slowly, almost reluctantly, towards the workers. Your fight's not with the people, and who's here? It's the people, the official said. The crowd responded all at once. They started going back and forth, and I couldn't follow it all, but I heard the commander's parting shot. It doesn't depend on me. Everything depends on you, muchachos. He paced back up the hill, shaking his head sadly, playing the role of, I gave it all I've got, but these guys, they just won't listen. And then, the riot police moved in. Filing down the hill in unison, they began to corral the small crowd of tens of strikers. Some strikers stood in the police's way while pretending like they weren't. When the police shoved them with riot shields, they threw up their arms as if someone had just spilled their drink in a bar, resisting, but still hoping this wasn't going to happen. The police herded everyone into the middle of the crossroads, lining us up so we were all directly in front of them. Then they lifted their shields and began to advance. One of the officers, standing right in front of us, took aim with a gun that shot pellets of pepper spray, then fired just to my right. A youth clad in black, his face covered by a scarf, leapt at the policeman, clattering a pole into his gun. Then, all hell broke loose. From Inside Crime, this is The Shadow of El Dorado, a series about the intricate web of corruption, violence, and complicity behind the gold trade in Segovia, a once thriving Colombian mining town turned mafia stronghold. I'm Matt Charles.
And I'm James Bargent. Throughout the following 7 episodes, we'll take you with us on our 8-year-long investigation in Segovia, and we'll explore the reasons for the town's descent into an endless cycle of violence driven by greedy elites, corrupt politicians, gangsters, and warlords.
Episode 1. Blood Gold.
We'd come to Segovia in search of gold. In a way, our journey was part of a centuries-long tradition, a couple of foreigners following in the footsteps of Spanish settlers and British prospectors. But we were looking for a particular type of gold, blood gold. We study organised crime, and Segovia is an epicentre of Colombia's billion-dollar black market gold trade. It's home to an army of wildcat miners whose operations are controlled and exploited by mafias and armed groups, and whose gold has supplied some of the biggest brands in the global economy. Not only jewellery giants and bullion traders, but also technology behemoths like Apple and Microsoft. Segovia also is, and has been for generations, one of the most violent places in Colombia, a country that has been racked by civil war and organised crime for decades. And its gold connects us, the consumers of these products, to this bloodshed. But the story of global consumers complicit in murder, war, corruption, and environmental destruction is, relatively speaking, a simple one. just a matter of working your way up the supply chain, link by link. What made our journey different was that in Segovia, there are no simple stories. We'd not expected our search for blood gold to lead us into a decades-old maze of legal battles surrounding a century-old mining company, or to the doorstep of a former aide to a warlord turned gold entrepreneur, or to a paper trail that connected Segovia's gold to presidents and billionaire investors. And we're definitely not expected to get tear-gassed on the front line of a general strike, as so-called illegal miners protested against a legal mining company.
Before we get to the political and criminal intrigue at the heart of this story, it's important to understand where Segovia's gold comes from and who's mining it. Segovia's a mountain town. Its streets roll up and teeter down the green-coated Andes, snaking outwards towards peaks and ridges. It all converges in a bustling plaza, which is filled with bars, street vendors, and bored-looking police. In the center of the plaza is a statue, a 3-meter-high golden Mother Earth, naked, manacled, and screaming as her insides are hacked apart by a dead-eyed miner. Segovia, in other words, is a mining town. Almost all mining in Segovia is subterranean, underground mining. But there are two ostensibly very different mining worlds. There's the legal, regulated, industrial-scale mining carried out by a Canadian multinational mining company. The company, previously known as Gran Colombia Gold, but now going by the name of Aris Mining, owns a vast mining title covering almost the entirety of the area around the town. And it will own that title forever. Thanks to a century-old historical quirk, the title's in perpetuity, as long as it's in use. And then there's the other type of mining, which takes place on the edges of that concession. These were the miners whose strike we found our lives caught up in. They were on a much smaller scale, using rudimentary tools and equipment. The government calls them illegal, or sometimes criminal. The miners prefer ancestral or traditional. The difficulty in finding a label that everyone can agree on is a product of the murky grey area this type of mining operates in. A grey area that was being mercilessly exploited by organised crime. This was the mining we'd come to see. The first such mine we visited in Segovia was Las Brisas, the Breezes. From what we knew of the town and its bloody gold wars, we half expected the entrance to Las Brisas to be guarded by stone-faced men clutching assault rifles, or at least tense men with radios to call the men with rifles. But when James and I got there, it was nothing like that.
So this is Las Brisas mine. You walk down a hill towards the mine. The first thing you see is like a little wooden shack, which is like a cafe where the workers get their breakfast, their lunch. Then on the left-hand side, you see they have a system with a winch to pull up like a cart. They've also got a respiratory system that pumps air down into the mine.
That's the constant whirring noise that you can hear. It's the air being pumped down into the mine.
And then the boca mina, the mine mouth itself, kind of this collapsed rectangle, and it's not big, is it?
No, I'm surprised at that. I thought it would be bigger. And it's just black. You can't see down there at all.
Even when you start going down it, you can only just see a few feet in front. And then
I'm not looking forward to going down there again.
We spent a whole shift underground in Las Brisas. The front where the miners were working was a steep 300-metre descent down a narrow, craggy rock tunnel. The air was hot and thick. An acrid, damp residue, left over from the explosives they use, clung to the back of our throats. It formed a slimy layer of sodden dust along the rocks. It was hard not to let the claustrophobia set in. That is Carlos Durango, the shift leader, better known as Pelo Mula, or Donkey Hair. He's one of several informal miners, as we'll call them, you'll be hearing from throughout the series. Both the bristly stubble on his head and the name are a family inheritance. He's short and stocky, but moves through the rubble and rock with a smooth, easy assurance.
Y ya la experiencia de nosotros los mineros, ya no sabemos que cadena, tirita.
Pelo Mula explained how they work the vein, the mining term for the streak of gold running through the mountain rock. The perforating crew drill holes into the rock, plug them with explosives, then retreat to set them off, hoping they only bring down the targeted area. When the dust has settled, the next shift returns to hack the loosened rock face with chisels and lump hammers. They load the loose ore into sacks, about the size of a small refrigerator, which they lug over their shoulders, bent at the waist, almost at right angles, their knees bulging with every step.
Serían dos elevadoras. Esta que es interna.
That is Pelo Mula's half-brother, Jorge Sepúlveda, another person you'll be hearing from in coming episodes. Jorge was manning the winch that hauls the rickety old rail cart to the surface. The pair are a study in contrasts. While Pelo Mula is hard-living, impulsive, and even a touch reckless, although not when he's underground, Jorge is diminutive, and like most miners, compact and muscular. But unlike his brother, he's soft-spoken, thoughtful, and articulate. Jorge was tucked into a crevice up the shaft from where Pelo and the others were working. That day it was Jorge, but every day a different worker operates the cart. It's the least demanding task in the mine, Jorge told us. And, despite the headache-inducing din of the cart, it's often claimed by whoever comes in with a dire hangover.
Sí, yo en estos momentos, acá en Las Brisas, soy el administrador.
Back at the surface, we meet Fabian Gutierrez, the mine administrator. Fabian's approaching middle-aged after a good 2 decades working in the mines, but it doesn't show.
Ya van pues. Ya van. Hey. Contenta.
He's stocky with a close-cropped head. He strides around the site with a restless energy, shouting and joking with everyone. But his face changes when he's serious, fixing into an intent and piercing stare.
Yo debo de estar acá en la mina. Tengo 6 años.
Like many men of his generation, Fabian began mining when he was still a child. Today's generation tend to start a little older, but not much. Fabian's teenage son was with us underground and already working full-time.
Porque yo esa mina tiene mucho tiempo de estar funcionando. Esa mina tiene por ahí 30 años.
Fabian told us the story of Las Brisas, how it's existed for more than 30 years, but was left abandoned when the original prospector died. Then, 6 years ago, a group of them all chipped in some startup money, cracked it open, and put it back to work. Today, he said, it's one of the best mines in Segovia.
Aquí trabajamos es como la familia.
They're like a family, he says.
Esto es muy artesanal. Esto es de muchos años acá en el pueblo.
Las Brisas provides work not only to around 60 miners, but also to about 100 chatarreras, which roughly translates as scrap workers. The chatarreras sort through the tons of rock discarded by the mine in search of the scraps of gold that remain within. Fabian took us to see their site at the side of the mine opening, where they scrub the rocks down and pluck out those they sense contain a slither of gold.
Acá vemos uno de los puestos donde ellas hacen el proceso.
They're almost all women, and most are single mothers, often left abandoned by conflict or crime, or fleeing from domestic violence and toxic masculinity.
Aquí en esta mina, 1 año con 3 meses. Nosotros, por ejemplo, yo tengo 2 hijos que están estudiando.
At a nearby mine, we met Maria and her friend Angelica. The other chatarreras shoved them forward as spokespeople when we asked for an interview, and it's not hard to see why. They like to talk. And they like to laugh, always teasing each other and us, and seeing the funny side of most situations, even ones that are hard to smile about.
Aquí en Segovia siempre he trabajado en eso, desde que yo me conozco.
Straining to be heard over the noise of the mine's ventilators and water pumps, Maria told us how she'd been a chatarrera since she was a child, and it was the only work she'd ever known. She was supporting 2 children on her own.
Sí, el sustento para nuestras familias.
Both Maria and Angelica want their children to study hard enough so that they don't have to depend on the gold trade.
Que se trabaja muy duro. Entonces no tratan a uno como trabajador, sino como un delincuente.
It's hard work, Angelica said. But not only that, it gets you treated like a criminal. Every 15 days or so, the mine's wealth is divided at the surface, according to a clear class system. The first sacks of ore go to the partners. These are the investors and administrators who own a stake in the business, people like Fabian. The rest is divided among the workforce, miners like Jorge and Pelumula. Then the chatarreras pack up what are essentially the leftovers. But from that point, all those sacks of ore, whether they belong to the partners, the miners or the chatarreras, follow the same route through the supply chain, adding value and generating jobs for Segovia at every link. To get a better sense of this part of the business, Maria and Angelica let us follow them and their gold on this journey. From the mines, the ore is taken to one of the processing mills, known as intables, which can be found throughout the town in ramshackle single-storey buildings slotted between homes and small businesses. The mills are dark, dingy and relentlessly loud, and they smell. A pungent, rotten, sweet smell that makes your nostrils flare and your throat gag.
Recogimos la mina y luego pagamos un arriero en bestia a traer hasta el intable. Nosotros luego acá venimos, la machamos, la echamos a la machadora, y se hizo pues.
They explain the process to us. First, the rocks are ground up in a machine called a machadora, a noisy metal box with a conveyor belt running through the middle that feeds the rocks in and the gravel out. That gravel is added to what's known as the coco, a belt-powered cylinder that spins with heavy metal balls inside, along with a dash of water and a dose of mercury.
Lo pone a moler 3 horas. Luego viene y lo saca en baldes, echa agüita para que se asiente las aguas.
The coco spins for 3 hours. When it's done, they pour the sludge that comes out the end into a gold pan, which they shake until they find the silver-grey blob of mercury, which has binded itself to the gold. Then they repeat, extracting the fragments of gold that may soon be part of a bracelet or an electronic circuit in a cell phone. The watery leftovers from this process run into a canal cut into the floor and out the back of the building, where they join the slumping grey landslide referred to as lodos, or mud. That mud contains as much as 40 to 60% of the gold, but it no longer belongs to Maria and Angelica. It's the property of the mill owner now. To get the gold it contains, it's shoveled into huge tanks that slowly churn it up with a cyanide solution. At the end of this process, the toxic waste is dumped down the hillside, leaving a dead zone in its wake.
Salió más bien pobre. Poquito, muy poquito. De 2 baldados. 3. Eran 3.
Outside the mill, Maria and Angelica look frustrated and not a little worried. They reckon they'd extracted about 12 grams from the scraps they brought to the mill, they told us. This was worth about 300,000 pesos, just under $100 at that time. By the time they subtracted their costs, such as tools, transport and using the mill, they'd be left with about 120,000 pesos each, or around $40 for 2 weeks' work. All the miners, as well as the chatarreras, face the same anxious wait each time they go through this process. The wait to know if, for the next couple of weeks at least, they'll be rich or poor, whether they can provide for their families and possibly hit the bars and the brothels. As the miners will tell you, most rarely think beyond their next visit to the mill. Maria and Angelica took their little mercury-laden gold balls to one of the gold traders, who have their own small storefronts. The traders' per gram prices fluctuate day by day through mysterious calculations based on everything from global commodity markets to black market trading conditions.
Por eso, conchudo. Antes tienes que pagármelo como yo le diga, a 2.70. Claro, obvio.
They argued with him, but had little option but to accept his offer, even though it chipped away further at their already meagre profits. So they handed over their amalgams, which the trader wrapped in crinkled plastic paper to control the heat and stop them from exploding, then thrust into the bright blue gas flame. The gold crumbled into small metal pans, and the mercury became fumes we all inhaled. The mercury from the traders enters the air, into people's bloodstreams, and eventually their DNA. But the mercury is easy to ignore. Once it's burned, it's invisible, and its effects on people's bodies and minds are hard to pin down. The other impacts of mining are not so nebulous. In Segovia, the miners have tunnelled out the town's foundations like termites, shafts on top of shafts alongside shafts, that leave Segovia teetering on hollowed ground. Huge swaths of the town are slowly sinking into the earth. Great fissures rive whole roads. Houses have cracks creeping up walls, snaking along floors and ceilings. Cracks so big you can put your hand in and reach through the corner of a house and out into the street. People in Segovia know the damage done, but they don't feel like there's any choice. It's the Faustian bargain behind the town's very existence. Segovia is a town that was built to be gutted. Gold is its tribute, the price it pays the world for the right to exist. If you spend any time in Segovia, it's hard to get away from the sense that the gold is cursed, and so is the town. Not only has the gold poisoned its earth, its water, and the air itself, it's also corrupted the town's social fabric, altered the boundaries of morality, and made Segovia a mafia town. In Segovia, good men are not always honest men. Bad men help their communities. Legal does not mean moral, while illegal can mean survival. Thieves get government jobs and killers run business empires, while those branded as criminals break their backs in honest labour. And in Segovia, fear has become a way of life. During our time in Segovia, we got followed by youths on motorbikes who made phone calls every time we stopped somewhere to record. We got approached by innocuous-looking people with strange questions about our day, or who dropped odd details about our movements into conversation. We learned from our connections in nearby towns that in Segovia they knew who we were. They knew what we were doing, and they knew who we were talking to. They were the Gaitanista Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, or the AGC if we use their Spanish acronym, a drug trafficking militia that was one of Colombia's most powerful and violent armed groups. And by the time we'd arrived, they controlled Segovia's gold trade. We didn't get to speak to them in Segovia. For that, we had to go to a nearby mining town, where we met with an AGC financiero, or money man.
Me matan esos hijos de puta, me matan hasta la pedacita que usted vio más allá me la pican.
That's next time on The Shadow of El Dorado. This series was the product of 8 years of investigation and on-the-ground fieldwork. This sort of work can be slow and painstaking, and it can be dangerous. It can also be expensive. If you want to help Insight Crime continue to produce in-depth investigations and analysis of organised crime, you can make a donation at insightcrime.org. If you want to dive deeper into the story of Segovia and blood gold in Colombia, head to our website at insightcrime.org. There you can see videos and photos of the scenes described and interviews with key characters. Explore documents laying out the paper trail we uncovered during our investigation, and delve deeper into some of the stories and people mentioned in this podcast. The Shadow of El Dorado is an Insight Crime podcast produced with La No Ficción. It was reported and written by me, James Bargent, and produced by Matt Charles. Script editing was by Stephen Dudley and Tatiana Lozano with the help of Elisa Roldan. Stephen and Elisa are the executive producers of the series. Sound design and editing for this episode was by Valentina Fonseca, and our graphic designer is Isabella Soto. Fact-checking for this episode was done by Beatriz Vicente Fernandez.